Charles, welcome to the summit. How are you, man?
Hey, thanks for inviting.
Yeah, well, it was a pleasure to invite you because I know that you talk about podcasts, and that's a really also exciting part on the prospecting and outreach level. So the floor is yours. Feel free to share a presentation or whatever you have in mind.
Right. First, really like the presentation of Natasha there, very relevant, especially the LinkedIn events. Yesterday, actually for this conference, I'm going to launch a LinkedIn events outreach campaign, and these work really good. So good job on that. Not sure if you guys covered these news here, but yesterday Outreach announced that, yeah, Google was going to put a bunch of people in the spam. And yeah, I thought it would be relevant for me to share my thinking on it real quick, which is basically that I don't think this is any scary if Google and whoever mail clients decide to put people in the spam. It's for one good reason, and it's for spammers, right? Cold email are not spam. If you send something good and relevant to someone, people are going to open. A couple months ago, Google stroke, and my open rate at some point, I think it got down to 20 or even 15%. It was quite low. But yeah, there's new solutions adopted, and just like AI, we're going to adapt to it. So don't be scared. Google sure will tighten up their rules in February 2024, but everything will be fine on that level. Now, with what I do, which is directly relevant and related to this, it's called podcast funnels. Here, the presentation is called podcast flywheel, but the premise is that I've been doing sales for the past decade, and I've gone pretty deep in the cold outreach game. That's what my agency does. We're called Top Leads. I also have a website called apolloliftup.com, which is cold email coaching. And the point here is that direct sales isn't working as good as it was as back in the days. People are submerged with a bunch of emails. So I was like, okay, I like podcasting. Well, at least listening to them. I'm going to experiment my own pod and just share value to the world, right? So I decided to start a pod, and lo and behold, I would use cold email to get guests on. And this is what my calendar looks like this week, so I booked probably 100, 120 meetings a week with this method. And the point is offer, right? Like if you offer something great to someone, aka a podcast call, they're gonna be more likely to accept a call with you. They can still be your ideal customer persona, your ICP. And what happens after the pod is done? Well, people ask basically what you do, right? Hey, like what do you do, Charles? I really liked your interview, the quality of your questions, how you think. And basically that converts, for me at least, into leads, right? So let's say that out of these 100 of interviews that I do per week, I'll close probably 5 to 10 into clients, which is pretty significant, granted that my services start at 1.5K a month. So that method right there is like, holy shit, that scales, right? Because sales email, yeah, some of them, especially if you're starting, they'll get you in the spam. And basically these podcast invitations, who will say no to podcasts? It's a stroke for the ego. It's exposure for people. It's free exposure. It's brain cells that are generated if the interviewer asks good question. And yeah, it's everything in between. You grow your network. You can even get clients from them. It's building a community, and it's fun. It's like therapy for most. So that's why I decided to start this podcasting agency that is called podpire.com, and I help people doing that. So let me just share briefly my system here. This will be very short, and I'll try to take a couple of questions here at the end. So yeah, 75 pod interviews per week. It has converted into 100, even 120, just that I also do sales calls on a daily basis, right? It's not all podcasts. Podcast is a bit more long-term than sales calls. Direct sales calls, like, yeah, I'm interested, let's do it. Podcast is more like someone that is harder to close or to get on a call, let's say Fortune 500, and someone that you can develop a relationship, right? Today we'll talk a little bit about newsletters, Once the podcast is done, we'll talk about the remarketing, for example. So yeah, that's what my calendar normally looks like. Basically, yeah, I get a bunch of CEOs watch my content, hundreds, thousands of them on LinkedIn every month. My guests on the pod, they make an average 426K a year. So they're highly qualified people. My pod, by the way, is called CEO Wisdom Podcast. I want to interview 10K CEOs in less than 24 months. That is 15 CEOs a day. I think I'm at 2K now. I might be in between 1.5K and 2K interviewed. These are examples of guests that I had on the podcast. Peter Rojas, he's the founder of Engadget and Gizmodo. For those that know that, I'm pretty sure that Danko knows that, being a tech nerd like I am. And yeah, I had this guy on the pod. He's now the head of product at Instagram and Facebook Messenger. So had like top guests like him. Basically, yeah, I also interviewed John Lee Dumas and Andrew Warner, the top two entrepreneur podcasts and startup founders. So basically, what and how I view each meetings in my calendar, it's like my bank account, right? Because every single of these meetings is worth money, whether it's like short term or long term. So the basics to set up these campaigns. We'd have the signature. I think Natasha demonstrated that already, the unsubscribe link and the warm up. I won't cover that too much. Sometimes you'll get these answers, like this guy was quite original with the fuck off. But the question is, do you want like one fuck off a day for 5 to 10 to 15 or 20 yes meetings? I think the answer is yes. And whatever you offer to people, some of them will always like be mad about it. This is my tech stack, by the way. I use Apollo. I create mailboxes from Namecheap. I connect them on Canary and Namecheap. I have a cPanel in there. And yeah, I use Apollo connected with SendGrid to send my emails. I use Contact Out and a bunch of other tools for the data, and Calendly to book meetings in my calendar, obviously. And I publish a podcast on YouTube. These are some of my campaigns, right, on Apollo. So as you can see, the open rate is quite consistent and the reply rate is quite high. I also recommend folks, because I also run a cold email AI agency, right? I'll always recommend my new cold email clients to start with podcast campaigns to warm up. That's a huge hack right there. We've talked about Google blocking you. Well, that won't stop, And if you start with a great offer, podcasts, you can get a very high reply rate and higher open rate and signal to these mailboxes that you're legit. I won't get too much in the technical details, but if you guys know Apollo, they have a warm up that is half working. That's the signature here. That's the unsubscribe. The copywriting is quite simple. So that's an example of AI personalized opener, which is not that great. I have other tools that I use for AI, notably Ample Market, notably clay.com. So these emails are quite simple. If you forget like the AI part, it's just like, hey, I'm interviewing leaders for my CEO Wisdom podcast. I'd love to talk about company and vertical. Can I pre-send you the topics agenda, or can I send you more info? Your product and the offer is always the best way to get a bunch of replies. So the more you can make that email attractive, the better. Me, I love simplicity. Also, my time is quite limited. So yeah, AI cold email, for example, is really trendy. Apart from the podcast offer, right? Podcast is obviously trendy, your GPT. Your niche is also super important. Like, who do you target? If you target AI folks nowadays, they want to go on podcasts. There's a lot of interest with Gen AI CEOs to go on podcasts. And this machine here that I showed you, that's a nice way to just test out product market fit at scale. And that's the beauty of it. Even before lead gen, I'm a market researcher, and I know what works and what doesn't. So when you do product right, when you do market right, you get product market fit. And that's when you'll get these open rates that are super high, this super high reply rate here. So, and yeah, that's what it looks like. There's various definitions of product market fit, but for me, it's like getting 15 yes, I want to go on your podcast per day, for example. So again, it looks like this. That's beautiful to me. When I just open this dashboard, it's like high open rate, high reply rates. Then I look at my calendars like, oh, it's going to be a beautiful day. But last but not least, you need some kind of backend to all of that, so that you can follow up with your folks and eventually convert these relationships into dollars. So that's why I have a community. It's called level96.com. It's a mastermind. So people pay for that usually. I have my newsletter as well. I have some paid one. I have some free ones. I have my LinkedIn posts. I have some remarketing. I have some affiliate program. So for example, when I share the pod on LinkedIn, sometimes get a bunch of likes. That's my newsletter here, high open rate, and it's growing. I think right now it's at 2.2K. And yeah, that's my LinkedIn, for example. So lots of views. And most importantly, my audience is people with money. It's not like a kid on TikTok, like making $200 a year. So yeah, that's a part of my AI tool tech stack. I thought I'd share Claude.ai, Opus for YouTube Shorts, Contact Out for the data, Harpa for the YouTube title and the chapter separation. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today. What I do is cold email, AI coaching, podcast coaching, done for you programs. That could be your calendar. That fuck off will be worth it because you'll get that calendar, and that will be you later on if you do everything right.
I had only one question here that is for you. So the question was that, so the podcast is a vehicle. So when you reach out to prospect, it's the purpose of outreach, the reason why you're reaching out, right?
Yeah, the podcast is more than just like lead gen. The pod is, like gaining exposure, right? Because people, when I post the pod with CEOs, they share with their audience. So I grow organically. It is knowledge as well. It's a market research tool. And last but not least, it's lead. I'll convert 5 to 10% of my guests into clients.
Perfect. Well, Charles, I know that you were in a rush. You have to disappear, but thank you again for coming, because I know that a podcast is also a nice outreach channel. It's not just an outreach channel, but from this perspective, we were really trying to share with the participants what kind of sales and prospecting things they can utilize, and podcast is definitely one of them. So thank you again for coming in, man.